Oh, that bell is going to be odd.
So I can turn it down.
We're also live streaming this event through Zoom, so every time someone joins, we'll hear a little ring.
No, I just turned it on.
Oh, now we won't. Great. Welcome, everyone. I'm Anand Chatpar. I'm the host of your meetup today. I'm on meetup.com. There's this online geniuses Bay Area meetup group, which I'm the main organizer for now. And it used to be part of this national meetup group called Online Geniuses. It's still part of that, but I'm trying to take it more in the direction of advanced growth hacking as opposed to just like online marketing in general. This is our the first time we've organized a meetup here. Hopefully you'll find something useful out of it, get something useful out of it, and, learn something. We're also live streaming it, like I mentioned. Let me do a quick introduction for our panelists today. Keith Shark is the CEO of Mystery Science. Right now, he worked as a product manager at Facebook, managing newsfeed. And before that, he was a co-founder of Inventables and also has given TED Talks on adoption of new technologies. So he's always been in the technology communication space. And we've known each other for more than a decade. We were both in college when we were doing our first startups. And I have learned a lot from him, and I hope you guys will also find interesting nuggets of knowledge from his from what he shares today. John Egan is our second panelist. He is the head of growth at Pinterest, managing the email, search engine optimization, and other channels for both acquisition and re-engagement. And he's done this for over 7 years now. Is that right? Yeah. And prior to that was also part of a company that was successfully acquired, a mobile app called Shopkick that was that he grew for to several millions of users before it was acquired. And John is also a well-known face in the growth community in San Francisco, as he runs the growth engineering, Meetup, and Slack. And he's always amazing to watch on stage. I was just in the audience last week when he was talking at the Growth Hacking World Forum, where he shared some amazing pieces of knowledge, which were very valuable. And another panel member that we have today is Huey Kwik. He is also my colleague at Mystery Science. He has several years of experience working with Palantir, where he was managing the UX team there. And he brings an amazing data-focused view to growth, which we really value. So the topic of our panel today is around advanced techniques in email and how we can use it for acquisition and re-engagement. Let's kick it off with some questions for the panel members. So I'm going to just maybe Keith, you can take the mic first and start, and then we will pass the mic down.
Probably. I bet it's better if we just leave it there, then we don't have to.
Oh, okay, that's great. Okay, that's great. That works even better.
Yeah.
So Keith, can you share what your experience has been in using email for user acquisition?
I think maybe this is an interesting perspective to start. So before starting Mystery Science, I was a couple years at Facebook as the product manager for Newsfeed, on the receiving end of everyone who wanted to share things into Newsfeed and the sort of never-ending contention that has to happen for like what things should Newsfeed show to any one user at any given point in time. And what led me to that role was building applications on the Facebook platform. I got to know people at Facebook. And when we started Mystery Science and we had to pick a channel to invest in first, we intentionally picked email and not Newsfeed. I think one of the main reasons I'll just give one highlight on that is things change a lot in the Facebook platform and newsfeed algorithm in terms of what gets ranked and what factors make a difference. And it's challenging with a new startup to try and contend with all of those changes and continue to optimize against that landscape. So it's one of the considerations.
Great. John, what is your thought on using email as an acquisition channel?
Yeah, I mean, so my personal experience haven't ever worked to use like email as an acquisition channel. Pinterest is purely just like retention and re-engagement.
Yes.
But I mean, I've talked to a lot of startups, and certainly it can be effective as long as you like work to make sure you are like targeting the right people. Ideally trying to get like opt-in or stuff like that before reaching out. But it definitely can still drive a lot of growth.
Well, in the early days of most social networks, there was the address book importer. Is that something that Pinterest ever did?
It's something we've done. It's not something we've kept. So Pinterest, like we've worked a lot on, or we did a little bit of invites because Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. had success with invites. Also, a lot of companies had incentivized invites and had success with that. But for Pinterest, invites never quite worked out because we didn't have an incentive where we could give users something. And then unlike Facebook or LinkedIn, where the whole there's no value even signing up for the service if you're not going to connect with your friends, Pinterest was very much an individual experience.
Yeah. And Huey, I'd love to hear from you as well. What you can share about using email as a user acquisition.
I think for us, it's been really effective. It's still by far the most effective channel we've had. At Mystery Science, we have tried other ways of acquiring users. I mean, we have done a little bit with Pinterest advertising as well as Facebook advertising, but never quite worked as well as
Are you guys able to hear him okay? Yeah.
everyone seems to have email.
Yes.
Especially in our market, I guess, teachers, we're trying to reach teachers. They all have email. So it's been really useful. Yeah.
How do you compare that with when using other channels for acquisition? You mentioned you've tried a few different things. Can you share the pros and cons of email versus like social media, for example?
Yeah, I don't know. We did experiment a while back around. We looked at this together around like trying to use Facebook advertising as a retargeting platform. And despite trying it a number of different ways, we never really quite got the same results as we did if we just tried using it.
Yeah.
Just for acquisition.
For acquisition. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the main users, like to walk you through kind of a user story about, because some of you may not be familiar with Mystery Science as well, but the short version of it is, we make a video educational product for teachers to show children in the classroom. So the way teachers often, their first touch point into Mystery Science is they can email referral from their colleague, say, hey, you should really check out this new free science resource. It's free for a year. And that tends to drive people to come to the site. They get that trusted referral, they sign up, they try it out with other colleagues as well, and it kind of keeps them.
So the teachers either type them in or, it's part of the referral process. So we have to incentivize them. So in the case of Mystery Science, there's an incentive to refer to unlock bonus content on the site. So if you say that, you can actually see the sign-up flow where if a user signs up, they are offered as part of the sign-up flow 60 extra mini lessons. And to unlock the bonus content, they have to refer 5 people via email. And that's been one of the most effective growth hacks that Mystery Science has used. Yes, Ryan, I wonder if we should do questions later, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, please.
How did you get the first customers on the platform? Now you've been referring, how did you get the initial 10 or 100?
I think Keith can talk to that.
I want to repeat the question for
No, the question that Ryan had was, before starting the referral loop, how did we get the initial set of users to bootstrap that referral loop. And I think Keith can share. I know the story for this, but I think it would be nice if Keith can share the
If you're able
avenues they
to,
use.
to have a viral coefficient of greater than 1, then you don't need a lot of users to start with. So specifically, if you can have a sign-up flow or just an overall activation loop for your users, where for every 100 users who come, after X period of time, they will share with other people, and then 102 users will eventually sign up as a result of that 101. Then, if the life cycle of that is short enough, then launching isn't the hard part. It's engineering a referral and growth process that will carry you forward. So once we sort of had a sign-up flow, we just simply shared it with a couple hundred users.
And I remember also a story where you actually contacted somebody who owned a Facebook channel, or was it like a page?
Yeah, we
Or a
emailed
group?
a bunch of mailing lists and Facebook pages
Yeah.
and said, hey,
As the
you
initial
wanna
bootstrap.
share this. But the real material part is having a product that people are excited enough to refer and making it easy to refer and optimizing that whole flow. And then you don't need a lot of people in the top of the funnel that will generate their own referrals at the bottom.
John, what are your thoughts on other channels versus email? How do you look at that and prioritize?
For acquisition. Or
For acquisition or re-engagement, I mean, how do you think about it, the different channel strategies?
Well, I mean, I think for every company, you have to think about what your strengths are. So, for instance, when I was at Shopkick, we were a mobile-only app, and so we really wanted to engage people on mobile because you lose a lot of people in the conversion jumping then from desktop to mobile. So for us, we leveraged invites a lot and did a lot of referral invites, but focused on SMS instead of email for that channel.
Yes.
Because otherwise we'd lose a lot of conversion rate when someone would open their email on desktop. Then I think, for Pinterest, for acquisition, SEO has been a really strong channel for us because we have a huge amount of content that we can leverage. And so that's been what we've leaned a lot for acquisition. I think in terms of prioritizing channels, whether it's user acquisition or whether it's user retention, it comes down to, what the channel's currently at. Oftentimes it's better to focus on channels that you've already kind of are strong and working for you and continuing to grow those, and trying to get a channel invites for Pinterest, trying to make that work. Because oftentimes there's a reason why it's not working already. And so it can make sense to try and place bets to see if you can make those work. But where we try and invest most of our resources are on the channels that are driving a lot of value and driving a lot of users.
So you mentioned earlier that email has been primarily a source of re-engagement for you. Would you be able to speak to that? How do you use email best for re-engagement?
Yeah. So for Pinterest, our emails and notifications have evolved since I joined. So when I first joined, they were very much sort of these social network type notifications that you got liked or you got followed, stuff like that. And what we did is we pivoted it to be more recommendation based. And the reasoning behind that was we felt like emails and notifications could be a reflection of the product's core value that users are trying to get. And most people on Pinterest weren't on Pinterest to engage with the social network. They're on there to discover content that was relevant to them. And so as we pivoted towards recommendations, it heavily increased engagement metrics and stuff like that.
Very interesting. Keith, do you have any thoughts on using email for re-engagement?
I'll share a thought. I'm curious to ask this as a question even on Pinterest is, so, one interesting thing is thinking about the re-engagement channel as being the same or different from the acquisition channel. And so before I share from history, I'm curious, since email is not an acquisition channel, do you see any, in a sense, you almost switch users from one channel to email as the reminder vehicle. Does that in any way affect the strategy for you guys?
Yeah, well, I think every single acquisition channel can double as a retention channel. So for us, it's just since we aren't using emails and notifications for acquisitions, an additional channel we can use for retention. And so I think obviously we prefer channels that are free. So for us, big channels that drive people are SEO, emails and notifications, and paid acquisition. And so we obviously prefer SEO or emails or notifications over paid acquisition because it's a lot cheaper for us.
Yeah. No, I think that's part of what motivated us to do email as an acquisition channel early on. Is it doesn't change very often as compared with the platforms like Pinterest or Twitter, Facebook or Twitter, potentially Pinterest. From an algorithm standpoint, it's free, and we get a lot of visibility into every step of the process. So we know exactly how many got sent, what message got sent, whether it got opened with some degree of precision, whether it got clicked, what the conversion of the clicks are. And the more you can track something, the more you can potentially optimize it. When we think about email then for re-engagement, one of the nice things is we know if this was an email that successfully converted on the acquisition side or not. So there's some, knowledge of like, oh, this person checks their inbox. And we mostly lean on the kind of default behavior of updating them for new content. Well, we don't have enough content to have a sort of custom curated recommendation algorithm like Pinterest, but it's one thing we think about moving towards over time. So instead, we just highlight sort of the new content of the week with everyone. And it's the number one thing that brings people back to the site.
There's certainly some segment of history science teachers who just think of that weekly newsletter as the product, right? So I think it's an interesting thing to think about as you're developing email strategies. Another piece to build on with the optimization, especially if you're building up your lists, and you don't have that much traffic to your site yet. One thing we've liked about emails is that it's pretty easy to run A/B tests on them because we have so many people signed up on our site. They all receive this treatment.
Yeah. Are you guys able to hear okay in the back? Okay, good.
Not okay.
Yeah.
I will project more.
Yeah. It might be a little bit soft. So anyways, I want to share one other related story, which is when I used to run Facebook apps and games, there were months where we would have 15 million daily actives, and then suddenly Facebook would decide to change a rule on us, and the traffic would drop down to like less than 1 million daily actives because we did not own the channel. Email probably comes closest to owning the channel and like owning your users, because even though you may use a deliverability provider like SendGrid or Amazon's SES, you can still decide how many notifications you send, when you send it, and it's all between you and the user. The user has opted in. They can opt out when they want. There is no third party that decides whether they will get your messages or not. As long as it's within certain bounds, you can't go ahead and spam users. Which, as all of us building valuable companies, we don't intend to do that. But having that control makes a big difference in the destiny of the company. That will depend on the channel to reach its users. I want to ask now about any surprising findings that all of you have had. Because I'm sure with your experience over the years, you've learned a bunch of advanced tips and tricks which like the person starting for the first time in using email may not ever realize or know or think about. So I'm wondering if any of you have tidbits like that you could share. Let me start with Huey. Okay. Or if somebody else is, John, do you have things that you want to share that are interesting and like surprising?
Yeah, I guess people always think of email as kind of just being this static thing, the static piece of content. But
Yes.
There's been a lot of changes recently in the past couple of years to make emails more interactive. So I think like one surprising thing is that you can do a lot of things nowadays that you weren't able to do in email just like a year or even 2 years ago. So there's companies out there, I think one called like Rebel Mail, that allows you to have a whole shopping cart in an email where you can like click add to cart and have that all happen within the email. Pinterest, we've had some success with adding interactivity to our emails through hover states and stuff like that. And Google's working to make emails even more interactive with something called AMP in email. So I think while email's been kind of viewed maybe sometimes as a dinosaur because it's like stable and like never changes, like there's actually a lot of interesting things that have been sort of coming together in the past year or two to make it a lot more engaging and interactive for users.
I remember the announcement from Google of AMP in email, and Pinterest was the featured partner where you had been an early implementer of this technology. And you could actually do all the things you can do on the site pretty much directly within the email without having to ever go on the site. It was pretty phenomenal. So I'm glad you brought that up. Any thoughts? Okay, Huey?
Yes, share a story. I mean, it's specific to some of the stuff we're working on, but like, we announce like a new piece of content, like a new mystery of the week every Sunday, and teachers receive that and they usually teach that during the week. We had gotten some feedback from our sort of like insider group of teachers that, oh, if you just told us this on Thursday, this would really like help us out so we could plan the week. So of course we were like, okay, let's do it. And then we actually launched this like Thursday announcement, and actually it seemed to actually interrupt the rhythm of teachers somehow in some sort of non-obvious ways that we actually found like the teaching that week's actually go down. So rhythms can be kind of a very delicate sequence or ritual that you need to be pretty conscious of.
Yeah, I mean, an extension of that reminds me is, we just in a recent A/B test on 2 different types. Well, we're actually working on changing the design of our email to make sure that we didn't break click-through rates. We A/B test the template, the overall design change. And we were surprised at statistical significance in the difference, and we eventually sort of narrowed down the difference more and more until there was no difference. It still had significance in the open and click rate. And we eventually determined it's because we weren't sending the emails at the identical time. Like one was queued up and then the other one was queued up, and just the couple-hour difference in that send was statistically significant. It's now on our list to think about exploiting this in our actual, trying to improve things further. I'm curious to the extent you guys have thought about this at Pinterest. Like each person having one thing we've talked about we haven't yet exercised is we in theory know the open rate of all of the people, and so we could maybe infer sort of a preferred email deliverability time of each recipient, and then customize when we send the email to people based on when they historically opened the email. Like, yeah, every morning I happen to check my inbox, or I'm an evening inbox checker or something like that. I'm curious if you guys have gotten to that level of optimization on deliverability times for individual people.
Yeah, we've worked on that quite a bit. I think one thing we learned though is actually like really personalizing it down to individual basis is really difficult due to just the sparsity of data in the email. So your average like click-through rate on an email is like maybe 5%, so 20% open rate, 20% click-to-open rate. So out of 100 sends, you maybe have like 5 data points to really try and make some sort of inference of what the optimal time is. So like while we've done a lot of iterations to try and personalize it, the way it kind of works now is we have sort of this like probability distribution of like what people like what times do they open it. And generally what we find is for most markets is that it's either mornings or evenings work well. And then when we do get like individual data points, we use that to like try and adjust that probability distribution to sort of start to tailor it towards you. But for most, like the vast majority of people, it's still just based on what the overall probability of just someone in that country opening at that time.
Oh, okay. So it's not like individual people are classified as a morning opener or evening opener, and then that it's more country based.
Yeah, and what we see is also just that for like people, it generally like there's not a lot of people where they're like strictly only a morning opener, and if you send it to them in the evening, they're not going to open in the evening. It seems mostly just based on kind of like work hours. So when they're free, they'll open and engage with emails, and then when they're busy at work, if you send it during that time, maybe they open it, but they certainly aren't going to engage.
Yeah. Oh, and another interesting finding we found was in our efforts to individualize messages. I guess I should say one of the other interesting things about email is a re-engagement channel, as opposed to like you get a bunch of people to a Facebook page and you use page posts to re-engage. Everyone sees the same thing, where you're sort of at the whim of the algorithm to see who sees what. Whereas using email as re-engagement, every single person can get a totally personalized email, like whatever your Pinterest recommendations are. And ads, paid ads, we even have some ability to personalize, but even that's hard to do on every individual impression basis. But as we've begun experiments in individualizing, personalizing the content in our emails, one challenge we found is that it can have an effect for a period of time but there's a novelty to the change in content. And so we got very excited around some experiments we ran where, oh, this is really increasing the open and click rate. And then after a few months, we went back and reanalyzed the data, and it was no longer improving the open and click rates. I don't know, I'm curious if you found similar things with personalizing content having a novelty effect.
We do see novelty effect in general with like changes in emails and notifications. I think with personalizing content, at least at our scale, we now have about 30 different email and notification types. And so users are always just receiving like different recommendations from different framings. So we'll have like a trending search email, and then pins recommended to you, and then like boards similar to your board. And so they're always one actually tactic we found is capitalizing on novelty effect by just always having like new stuff. So I think a great example is actually emoji in email subject line. So we found that for our product that if we were to send someone an email subject line that had an emoji every time or had their first name every time, it actually led to like negative engagement. So what we did is we worked to build out like a system to just like periodically intersperse like an emoji. So if it's been like 3 emails since the last time you got an emoji in the subject line, we'll put an emoji in this one. And that actually led to like long-term sustained gains, just sort of capitalizing on things you notice that have a novelty effect, and then just use it sparingly.
How do you, as you talked about the 30 different sort of email types, how do you keep track of all the different types of emails you could be sending to someone at a given time, and like what that user's journey is as they receive so many different emails, whether they're onboarding emails or notifications?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there is no single user journey. Actually, for us, we found that user onboarding emails actually were not effective. And so our strategy is to use content to re-engage users, bring them back to the product, and then do product education in the product. Now, that doesn't make sense for every company. It's certainly very product dependent. So, a B2B company is following that advice probably would not be the right move. But at least for us, since Pinterest is a very content centric and content heavy site, it's like the old saying, content is king. So leading with the content to bring it back and then doing education and product is what works best for us.
I want to ask about a little bit more of a technical thing here. Number of new people who launch a product struggle with email deliverability because they haven't quite figured out how to get their user base to consistently see the email in the inbox and consistently open it and so on. So there's a number of things that are suggested. Some people think that you should use 2 different IP addresses and you set up your SPF record so that your transactional emails are coming from one IP address and your marketing emails are coming from a different one. And some people think that a blend of emails going from the same IP address is better for deliverability long term. Do either of you have any opinions on technical aspects of email deliverability, such as SPF records, DMARC records, or like the use of different IP addresses? Any thoughts, John, on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think one big thing is like your choice of like technology providers. Are you going to have like dedicated IPs or is it shared IPs? Because a lot of email reputation is based on like IP and domain reputation.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for Pinterest, the way it's set up is we have like separate sub-channels. So there'll be like the sub-channel for password reset emails that goes out on one set of IPs that have like super high engagement. So it gets like basically 100% deliverability. Then we have our sub-channel for all the re-engagement stuff, which gets good engagement rates, but obviously it's not going to be at the same level of a password reset email. And I think between the sort of 2 that you shared, it comes down to a little bit like what types of emails you're sending out. So if you have like some kind of crappy emails that you want to get in people's inbox, and you also have like some good emails, like maybe sending them all across both IPs is good. But if you have some emails that are really important to deliver, and then another set of emails that get a decent engagement but don't have that same level of importance, separating it out by IP pool can help make sure that your important emails really get delivered.
Other thoughts on this, Keith, from a technical standpoint?
I mean, I think one interesting thing is that a lot of people have deliverability issues with Twitter and Facebook posts. I don't know about Pinterest.
Yeah.
And they just don't know it, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, I've got 1 million followers, and every time I post, I assume 1 million people are going to see it, and it's a fraction of of that audience that actually sees it. So one of the great things about emails, for the most part, you have deliverability issues. Like you'll get bounce backs, or you won't see opens. Historically saw that. I mean, we haven't had a lot of issues there. I think it's surprisingly complicated to get set up right in the first place, like dedicated IP address, SPF, DMARC, and running it through a set of email scrubbers to rate your spam score and like flag various issues you might have inadvertently introduced. Like, do you have an HTML and a plain text version? There's a lot of best practices you have to get right, but there's maybe a dozen things, and each one of those is a little tricky. But once you get all those set up, it's not really that hard. I mean, I think fortunately, people like Gmail and Google have done a great job at making the deliverability problem easier for all of us. Like they've solved the spam problem to a large degree. So we get to kind of ride on the coattails of that.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, like one other thing that's really important is measuring engagement on a per domain basis. So one thing that really helped with for us was like for each domain, we measure like what is the number of opens, clicks, and deliveries for the domain this week versus 4 weeks ago, and then alert when there's significant changes. And then the types of domains that we find usually are the most problematic are a few country-specific ISPs. So there's like a couple in Brazil, a couple in France, one in Germany, one in South Korea that are always like problematic for us, one in Russia as well. And then actually we find like some school ISPs are also sometimes problematic.
Yeah, we do this on the district level, because like we'll notice, wait, all these people in a particular district are no longer getting our emails, and then we'll flag it internally. So yeah, we do that same trick of flagging on a domain basis.
Very interesting. I want to take the conversation to how you think about the future of this channel now. Clearly, mobile versus desktop usage changes year over year. We are hitting a point where it's email use over the mobile phone has basically dominated in the last year or so. But there may be other changes coming in the future. So I'd love to ask all of you how you think about the role of email in the future and how you see things changing. Any thoughts on this, Huey?
I think some of the technological changes that John mentioned are certainly interesting. Like we can definitely make emails more interactive and feel more like things you would see outside an application.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, for some reason, when I think about your question about the future of email, I just think about the fact that it hasn't really changed that much. Like there's so many people who think about killing email. Like we use Asana.
Yes.
And they promise they're going to kill email one day. Asana's been around for like 10 years, and I still use my email. Like I use project management tools all the time. Email still seems to be around. It seems like it's just going to die. If it's going to die at all, it's going to die very soon.
And what do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's been blog posts about the death of email going back 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think, like, for us, like, I think there are some things that are interesting to make email more interactive. We also just treat email as like a channel to deliver our message, and we also can deliver all the same notification types on push. We can choose, we don't support SMS, but we can deliver them all on SMS. So I think, for us, these are all just communication channels, but email is one that I think we continue to see good engagement. We've been working on it for 5 years at Pinterest and haven't seen any declines in engagement in that time, and have only actually seen engagement go up. So
very interesting. Yeah, I have some thoughts on why we are seeing engagement go up as well. But yeah, Keith, what do you think as the future?
I'm trying to think of something I can add that might be different. I mean, I think it's interesting. We're seeing this general trend of increased personalization through training algorithms, and so that continues to trickle down in email, like the Pinterest recommendation algorithms. And there's a number, Wish has a really good recommendation algorithm on their e-commerce emails that they send out. And so I think we'll continue to see that trend. I mean, I think a subtle variation of that trend is, there, a lot of times people think about sending emails to drive someone to the website or the app to then engage them there. And increasingly I see these clever things like with AMP, where it's like, well, if we could just make the experience happen in email, then we'll lose one fewer steps of the funnel to drive them to the site. So there's some little clever things there. But yeah, I really like Huey's point that one of the great things about email is that it won't change a lot. And that's what makes it worth a multi-year investment.
So one of my thoughts on this is that there used to be a time when spamming was really easy. And this is no longer the case now. So the emails that do get delivered to my inbox, I actually get a chance to read because they are relevant, they're not as spammy. So that may be one of the reasons why emails that reach the inbox have seen higher engagement, because there's less noise, because there's better spam filtering now compared to 5 years ago. Another thing which ties back to the personalization bit is that if I get an email that's more like the hottest vacation destinations this Christmas, that's not as interesting to me as an email that I get that says the favorite vacation destinations among your friends, because I would be curious to know what are the favorite destinations among my friends, because that is a more personalized piece of content for me. And it is possible to do that today, which was not possible 5 years ago, because social networks give you the ability to tie your profile to your friends, and there's all this other data that you can now process, with data science becoming like an established field and email being personalized on a one-to-one basis. We are part of the Y Combinator summer of 17 batch, and our partner Gustav, from whom we learn a lot, once mentioned this, that they had done a bunch of tests when he was at Airbnb, and they found the same thing. Personalized emails make a bigger difference than editorial emails. Editorial emails is just like content that's generic that you send everybody else. So I think in the future we'll see more personalized emails, which are actually more valuable and more relevant to users. And as a result, the engagement will keep going up. But that's we'll see how it goes. So with that, I think we can open up the panel to questions, and feel free to ask questions about things you've heard or new things you're curious about. There's decades of experience here on the panel.
You should throw the mic or repeat the question. Either one.
We can repeat the question.
Yeah, you can repeat the question.
Okay, I'm happy to repeat the question. So if anybody else has questions to ask, is Dhawal.
So about the referral channel, what have you found around? What are the incentives that are needed for someone to give you 5 email addresses, or even 1 or 5 or 10?
I don't think there's a magical incentive that works. I mean, it's so product specific, so it depends so much on the nature of your product. I think to the extent there's some generalized useful advice, I think a common mistake I see with companies is, people developing a product, is they assume that, we want users to fall in love with the product and then they'll refer lots of people. There's always quite a high drop off between, for every 100 users that sign up, how many of them are going to become deeply engaged. And so you can wait until deep engagement before you start driving referrals, but you don't have to. I actually think there's very often sort of 2 notable stages in a new user's journey. One is understanding the promise of a product and getting excited by that promise, and then becoming an active user of that product. And they're often very separated in time. Like I use Pinterest more regularly now than I did, 6 months after I signed up for it. Like I signed up because I heard about it and I kind of understood what it was, and then I didn't use it, and then it sort of wormed its way into my life. Like the same with Evernote and Trello and Asana, so many tools. But the point when I sign up and I'm intrigued by it is very different than the point when it starts to become a sticky habit. And so I think one of the bets that we made was we can make our promise clear and exciting enough that we ask for referrals during the sign-up process. and you don't have to get as many referrals per user for the numbers to work out well than if you wait until sort of post engagement. And it's still optional, so lots of people won't refer, but
do they get like anything for referring their friends to mystery science?
We've experimented with different things. Our current incentive is extra content. So and just to give you a rough take, these are approximate numbers, but for every 100 people who sign up, approximately 40% of them are enticed by the extra content that they choose to refer. On average, they refer about 6 people. You only need to refer 5 people to unlock the extra content. And then of those, so 100 people, 40 refer. On average, they refer 6 people, so that's 240 referral emails that go out. And we experiment with different body copy, and we get to control that. And we know the open and click rate. And then there's 240 emails bring approximately, I forget what the click rate is back to site, but like 50% or so. Yeah, so 120 people now land back on the website because of the 100 people. But then we don't get 100 new signups, we get less than that. So our viral coefficient is not greater than 1, but that's the kind of engagement that we see. So yeah, currently it's extra content.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to incentives, there's usually fall into 2 camps, which I kind of mentioned earlier. Either there's some sort of a value you're giving to the user, so it could be monetary, it could be extra content, or unlocking new features, or it's something where there's no point in even using the product because the whole value of the product is connecting with other people. So that whole value of the product connecting with other people is a limited set of companies that are like that. So I think when it comes to the incentive in terms of giving them something, like I said, it could be monetary. If it's extra content or unlocking features, the one trade-off though is how does that impact potentially activation rate? So if you just gave them those features to begin with, or that extra content to begin with, maybe that would actually be net better for you. And so you need to run those tests and to see is it better to try and use as a referral incentive, or does it lead to much bigger activation rate?
Yeah, actually an interesting classification that I used to think about was, there's some products where the act of using the product necessarily notifies their friends. So Evite and e-greeting card websites are kind of the classic. To use Evite is to tell 20 people that Evite exists. And then there's the, the Instagram, Facebooks of the world, which I would have put Pinterest in this category, where the product experience is a whole lot better if more of your friends use it. So you're implicitly incentivized. And then there's the personal utilities, which I guess you're saying Pinterest is more like a utility. I feel like we're in the hard category where it really doesn't get better if your friends use mystery science. And so we think about, since it's a personal utility, what's the personal incentive?
Do you have thoughts on this question?
I mean, I think other general principles on the email, I would say urgency, if you can kind of find it, can also be a motivating factor. This thing is time limited. And I think the other thing besides focusing on the number of referrals is just making sure that the referrals you send count. So actually tracking all the other steps of the funnel and making sure they actually convert. Also a place where urgency can help.
Yeah, I have examples. So all of these points were super relevant. One common theme I've seen across incentives that work is building curiosity. So for example, in one of the dating apps that I built on the Facebook platform, when the user signed up, we had a screen that said, before you see your matches and before you see your score, who are the other single people that you know? And then you would have to pick your friends and invite them. So the idea that you could see your matches or your match score by referring people increases curiosity. Another one that we have seen work, there was scarcity and urgency based in my gaming days was, for example, it's December and you want to, in one of my games called Pillow Fight, there's a time limited pillow only available in the month of December, which is a Merry Christmas pillow or a Happy New Year pillow only available until the 1st of January. Time limited. And there's a countdown you can show them. Hey, you're only going to get a chance to throw this once. Here's a countdown. Refer, in our case, we used to have them refer 20 people to be able to get this really expensive virtual product, which is a Merry Christmas pillow, for example. But building curiosity and giving them urgency and scarcity. That makes sense. That works. I hope that answers your question in sort of enough detail. Other questions? Oded, I see.
Regarding deliverability, specifically in Gmail, now that there is the promotions tab and the main tab, do you have any tips on how to get more visibility in Gmail?
Yeah.
Now that Gmail has started separating out emails into promotional and inbox and social and so on, how do you get more inbox visibility? That's a good question. Thoughts on that from anyone on the panel?
We haven't optimized at that level at the beginning.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really hard to influence. Like, Gmail is trying to build, has tons of engineers working on building ML algorithms to try and classify what goes into each tab. And then also, like, what's difficult is, like, what goes into each tab can, like, vary from, like, user to user as well. So what we saw, though, is, like, when it rolled out back in, like, I don't know, like 2014 or something like that, we didn't see, like, big shifts in engagement. But then later on, we kind of made some changes. We like spun up some like new IPs that start with like fresh reputation, and we saw that they started landing in a different inbox now than it was before, and we did see some like shifts in engagement there. But it's not like something where it's going to be like 20% more engagement or anything like that. At least for Pinterest, like small single digit percentages are still really impactful for us. So.
Yeah. Other thoughts? I have some thoughts on this. So imagine that you were the engineer working for Gmail. How would you decide which email goes where? So I'm trying to reverse engineer the process on Gmail's side, right? So I have never worked for Gmail, but if I had to guess, the click-through rate and the response rate on the email and on maybe the domain, those are good signals. Those signals could inform your decision for future emails, because you see this email going to thousands of users, and within the first 100 people who see that email, you can make a decision saying, oh, it looks like this email gets marked as spam quite a bit, or never gets a reply, nobody reads it because they just like select it and mark it as read by just looking at the subject line. If that is the case, this will happen. So how can you hack your way into the inbox? So imagine that your message came from the name of a person as opposed to the name of a company. The subject line was all small letters, like, hey, very ambiguous. Probably somebody would have to open that. Another one could be, it ends the body of the email with a question. So I had received an email recently, which I did not know was from a mailing list. This one guy called Eric Riao runs a growth newsletter, and he sent me a message which I thought was a personal message. And he's like, hey Anand, the subject line was hey Anand in all small letters. The entire email was also lowercase. One line email. I'm figuring out content for my next newsletter. Do you have any specific questions I should cover in it? There's no links in the email, and I was expected to send a reply. It's only when I clicked reply when I realized this is actually going to some kind of like newsletter email address. But I did send the reply, and it did influence the next time when the person sent the email. It landed in my inbox and I went and I saw it. I wanted to see if my suggestion was followed. But there are ways to figure out how to get into the inbox. So like, think like the engineer working in Gmail, how you would decide that, and then you would figure out how to reverse engineer it. That's like the standard growth hacker technique.
Although I'd say there's some things that might work on small scale that aren't going to work at scale.
At a very large scale, yeah, that's right. When you're a startup, you can get away with lots of things, which like companies with millions of users can't.
Hey, it's a question for, I guess, both Pinterest and um, Mystery Science. What's like a surprising thing you discovered doing retention, like when people just drop off? Like, do you just give up? Do you just like personalize harder and just spam them forever? Like, what are some surprising things that you guys have learned in doing, trying to like engage people who are just like ghosts?
So I can start. I think like one thing is like for Pinterest, we have a machine learning algorithm that personalizes how much we send you, but the least they can send you is one a week. So at a minimum, if you hit like being dormant for 4 weeks, that means you've not responded to at least like 4 emails. And what we found that is effective is just like shifting up like tactics. So for instance, when it comes to email, usually there's a topic that we pick in the email. Like, you know, this is going to be an email about puppies if you're engaging with puppies on Pinterest, or this is an email about shoes if you're using Pinterest to find shoes. And as you become less and less engaged, the topic picking algorithm starts to then say like, okay, maybe these topics aren't working for this person. Let's start exploring new topics. And I know Quora back in the day had like an algorithm where they keep sending you the same email type as long as you kept responding. And then when you stopped responding to that email type, they would then start sending you another email type. And so I think just if you start to see someone drop off, that means whatever tactic you're trying to use to re-engage them seems to have stopped working, and it's time to see if you can try a different tactic with them.
Will you continue indefinitely at a minimum of an email a week or at a maximum of an email a week?
So we stop after you haven't engaged in 180 days. So that's a big thing with deliverability to avoid like spam traps and stuff, is to stop emailing people if they don't engage, because what some spam companies will do is they'll buy a domain that is like now defunct. They'll sit on it for 180 days or 365 days, and then they'll start marking everyone who's still sending to that domain as spam. So having like good list hygiene and making sure that you're removing people who aren't responding is important.
Yeah, one interesting thing we found with that group is even though that group has relatively low engagement, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So it can be in material numbers that it drives for re-engagement. But like we have a very cyclical business with the school year, and so we'll see a lot of re-engagement, even the raw number of people who re-engage at the beginning of a school year, even from a relatively defunct group of users, can be material.
I want to share one experiment we did, which was surprising here. You asked about a surprising thing for re-engagement. We created a custom Facebook audience out of users who had signed up but were not super active. And with the Facebook custom audience, we asked them, we showed them a messenger ad as opposed to a newsfeed ad or right side ad. And we asked them to respond via messenger and just like request something to get something free back. And we found that to be a super effective channel, very, very cheap in terms of the ad buys. And one of the big reasons we figured out that one of the reasons that teachers had not engaged, or the users had not engaged with the email and they had like lost engagement, was because they had given us either the wrong email or they no longer had access to that email. So they left their job, or like now they suddenly have a different email address. Somebody changed their name, which happens every once in a while. If you have a list that's old enough, you'll have a certain percentage of users whose emails will churn. So companies like Facebook track their users, these users across all their email changes. You can adopt that as a medium to then bring them back into the email channel and then send them free emails. So you don't have to pay for that.
One interesting technique I've noticed, I know Instagram does this, I think Facebook does this now too. A lot of companies that have implemented this magic link, where instead of a password reset, they email you a link and you log in. So what we recently did that is just an improvement on our password reset flow. And I've noticed Instagram now will send me emails saying, it looks like you're having trouble logging in, click this magic link to log in. But I didn't try and log in. It's just they're using their magic link template to try and re-engage me as a user. and it worked a couple times. So I was like,
Oh,
oh,
Thomas.
yeah, yeah,
It's good hack.
So I suspect it's working. We haven't done it, but
Say that again. I couldn't. Yeah. You want to say that again for the audience?
Oh, I said until it's like really important for something like your bank account or something.
Yeah.
I know like where I'm from, the Midwest, like insurance companies and like banking is like a big user experience, and I follow, and that's right. That's like the culture I came from. But like, so that tactic, like, with yours is education. There's no harm, no foul, but like in certain areas, like.
Yeah. If somebody tried to log into my bank account, looks like you're having trouble logging. That would be dangerous. Yeah. So you can't really use that in finance easily. We probably have time for one last question before we wrap up. Anybody else?
What is your typical tech stack for emails?
What's your typical tech stack for emails? Good question.
I mean, for Pinterest, it's all in-house, except we use Spark Post for actual delivery.
I mean, for us, it's all in-house except that we use some.
Yeah. SendGrid for delivery, and all the tracking, everything is custom built in-house. Ruby on Rails and Postgres. And what are other parts of the stack you're interested in? The analytics, yeah. For Mystery Science, it is custom built in-house. The one challenging aspect also of scaling the speed at which you send is that you kind of need a cloud provider where you can spin up instances really fast, so you can send lots of emails at once. And we use Heroku, because Heroku allows us to dynamically spin up more dynos, which are basically VPS servers that can then act as email sending machines. Yeah. Another question over here.
I did. Yeah. Which books and/or blogs do you recommend in terms of useful knowledge for basically going from 0 to 1 in terms of understanding all the different components involved and actually setting up an email deliverability operations within the company?
Reading material for setting up email deliverability.
Correct. And just getting the basic knowledge, right? Because there's a lot that can't be learned unless you split test a crazy amount for your particular demographic and your particular content. But I'm talking about the stuff that allows you to be able to get to the point where you can run those experiments.
Yeah, I mean, the basic stuff you need to set up is like all the stuff around email authentication, which is DKIM, DMARC, and SPF. So just like Googling those, you can find like just like good resources on how to set those up. Also, usually any email provider will also have like how-to guides to set those up. So if you're going to use Amazon SES or like SendGrid, like they'll have something in their help pages or help center telling you like step-by-step how to set those up, because you can't really send until you have those set up. And then beyond that, like when it comes to deliverability, I think it just comes down to like having like good engagement rates. So if you have like great engagement, you probably won't run into deliverability issues that often or won't run into anything major. It can become more of an issue though if your rates are on the lower end of the spectrum.
Other thoughts?
It's notable that there isn't like one book that does cover this. So that could be an opportunity for somebody.
I mean, I think it also changes. Like DMARC is relatively new. It's been around for like only just a few years.
Yeah, I think the big email deliverability providers have the best blog posts around this stuff, because they actually observe what happens to the emails of many, many companies that are their customers. So they are able to extrapolate best practices and share with the world. So those blogs
that specialize in deliverability, like Return Path is like one of the big ones when it comes to deliverability. And they'll happily take your money and help you with your deliverability issues.
Return Path has amazing white papers on this topic, but they're also like, it's an expensive service.
Yeah.
Just a quick last question. You guys mentioned AMP for email. Can Pinterest talk about like the engagement with that? Has that been good? Is that something that people are engaging with, or?
Yeah, so it's not something that's actually live yet. So Google did a demo on the spring of this year where they announced it, and it'll go live at some point, and not allowed to say when, but at some point.
Yeah, the basic idea with AMP was that they gave you special tags that would work in an email content, so that your email could be dynamic when delivered to a gmail.com inbox, but then other email providers can ignore it. I think that should be the end of our meetup today, and thank you everyone for coming despite the smoke outside. Really appreciate your questions as well as your interest. I hope to keep doing more meetups and having other interesting topics covered in the future. I would love your feedback. All of you, if you haven't received emails from me before, then you are probably unsubscribed on Meetup, like one of our panel members was. But if you are receiving emails from me, then that's great. Send me feedback by email. I would love to hear what you want to do. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to all our panel members for sharing their in-depth knowledge today. It's really valuable. Especially thank you, John.